Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining. I am joined today by Mark Hayward, a titan, a godfather, a patriarch of our industry. Welcome, Mark, and thanks for giving us your time today.
Thank you, Nat. And what a great introduction. I don't know if it's all true, but anyway, thank you.
No, thank you. So for those that don't know, I'm sure that lots of people do know you. If you could just introduce yourself and where you are at the moment, and then we'll go into a few questions with you.
Well, I'm currently Chief Policy Advisor for Propertymark. That was due to the fact I was asked to stay on an extra year, having agreed to step down at the end of last year as Chief Executive of Propertymark. I've been with Propertymark for 10 years. Prior to that, I was a board director of Propertymark and chair of the board of Propertymark, and I've spent my whole working life in property.
Brilliant. Okay, well, that you living up to the reputation and the introduction that I started with there. So thanks very much. All right. So let's dive in then straight away, Mark, if that's all right. So question for you. So to the outside world, agencies would seem largely unregulated, with perhaps ROPA and other initiatives like that being kicked into the long grass. So now that you're off the leash, so to speak, or almost, what's your view on how and when there might be regulation of agents? Will it be easier to, in fact, buy a home in the future? What's your view on that?
Well, I think firstly, the consumer, and certainly the research we've done in the past, suggests that the consumer thinks that the industry or the sector is already regulated. So Right. It's very surprised to find it's not, when you have other actors in the sector, lawyers, financial advisors, etc., who are regulated. The current government is committed to regulation. As we know, the big question is when, and I don't think the question is if, it's when. And that will depend very much upon the parliamentary diary and possibly upon the then Secretary of State. And we've had a number of Secretaries of States and we've had a number of housing ministers over the years, as you know. Yeah. We do know that the government wants to accelerate the house buying and selling process, wants to digitalise it, and wants to make it a much quicker, smoother, more certain procedure,
That's for sure.
particularly for the consumer.
Yeah.
So it is going to happen. I can't say when, but I'm convinced that it will. And all the conversations I've had since the ROPA report came out, I was on the ROPA working group, just one of 10 people, and I know there is commitment there. But COVID and Brexit have put the, as I said, the parliamentary diary way back.
Okay, so I mean, you've been at the heart of the industry, as you said, for many, many years. What's the biggest improvement do you feel that's needed to help agents do an even better job?
I think we may talk about property technology. I think that the whole system of buying and selling a house is antiquated. If you look at at the English law that's attached to conveyancing, it's nearly 100 years old. So it hasn't really improved. If you look at other countries, whether it's in Europe or whether the States, and I talk to many of my opposite numbers there, they're just appalled at how long it actually takes for that process to go through. In the States, as you know, it's probably 2 weeks until you get to the initial signing, and then it's handed over much quicker in places like France and Spain. So we do need to actually come up into the real world. It doesn't help, of course, that our industry, the fees our industry charges in the UK are the lowest in the world. They're the lowest in the world. So we are having, I think, to operate not with our hands tied behind our back, but not necessarily suitably remunerated. But if you're suitably remunerated, should the agent be doing more in the process rather than I agree a sale, I then pass it on to a conveyancer? When a lot of other countries, the realtor, estate agent, whatever you want to call them, will take it to in effect a binding contract, and then will hand it over. We know the government is looking at reservation agreements, which in theory are good, but how that work in practice when we have chains, and again, in other countries they don't have this chain situation. So what will improve that? And again, I think there are movements afoot to make that better. So I think there will be a combination of things that will need to happen relatively quickly, to, I suppose, catch up with what's happening generally.
Keep pace is what
Keep
with
pace.
what's happening elsewhere. Yeah, I mean, there's situations where properties and buyers are coming to the market and actually not in a position to proceed. I mean, that's always been the bugbear of agents, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That, I want to buy that house. Well, can you buy that house? Well, no,
Yeah,
I can't.
yeah.
I can't at the moment. I'm not in a position
Yeah.
To buy that house. So again, is that some pre form of qualification, or you need to actually put yourself in a position? And we've talked a lot in various groups about upfront information, commitment. Upfront information. Not only is the property market ready, but it's sale ready as well.
Yeah.
Because as you know, you and I can buy a house today at auction. I can go and buy a house. I can do that.
Yeah.
Finally, I've got the means to pay for it, but I can do it.
Yeah. And you're ready to exchange contracts.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's kind of what at least we should be moving towards fairly soon, as you say. Okay, thanks, Mark. So, look, Propertymark has perhaps never seemed to capture the membership and interest of perhaps all of the agents in the UK. Would that be fair to say? I mean, perhaps comparing it to the NAR, the National Association of Realtors, in the US. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I know NAR very well, and I've visited them a number of times. For a start, they've been in existence for well over 100 years.
Right.
They have copyrighted the word realtor, so you can't call yourself a realtor or an estate agent in France unless you're a member. But more importantly, the industry is regulated.
Right.
So you have to have a license to practice. As you know, in the States, the majority of those that operate are self-employed. So they may be part of a brokerage, but that's only an umbrella. So they're self-employed, so they need the backup of an organisation. They have to retrain. They have to do CPD. It has to be certified CPD. So I think the Propertymark's done very well in an unregulated sector. And I suppose there's the argument is, well, Propertymark wants regulation because that's just going to boost membership, isn't it? No, we want regulation to clean up what Sajid Javid, who was Secretary of State at the time, 3 odd years ago, said, was a broken property market with a rogue element that needs to be eliminated.
So that's quite a difference then from the US models to where we are over here at the moment.
As you know, anybody in this country can call themselves an estate agent set up tomorrow. You can't do that.
Yeah,
you can't do that in most European countries. You can't do that over in the States.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Mark. So you're now involved in a bit of proptech, as we mentioned earlier, with Just Move In.
Yeah.
And you're perhaps one of the most experienced and mature figures in the sector. Mature, I said mature. Do you think proptech the proptech scene needs fewer disruptors and more wise old hands for the future?
I think it probably needs a balance of both. We're never going to replace the human element, but I think technology, and proptech is probably a sort of a hackneyed phrase, but I think technology can help to make it smoother, to make it more certain. We know that we're currently just starting to deal with generation X and Y, who are extremely IT savvy. But because of the fact that you can't buy a house probably until you're 35, they haven't yet engaged with the sector. And once we get to Generation Z, who will do everything on their phone and their tablet, then the market and the way that properties are marketed and conveyed will have to change.
Okay, so in fact, there's potentially something coming there in terms of more proptech required and more use of technology required in the future.
Could be, but then, on the other hand, 50% of all properties in this country are owned by people over 65.
Right. Okay. All right. So you've got the other side of the
transaction.
transaction.
Got the other side who perhaps don't necessarily engage with that, and again, that's producing a logjam in the market at the moment.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks very much.